Welcome to this explainer. Today we're unpacking a really complex and honestly alarming shift happening right now in Northern Ireland. You know, this is a place historically defined by very specific lines of conflict. But the data and recent events show those historic divides are taking on a startling new shape. We're going to explore how old paramilitary ghosts are literally being weaponized by modern digital tools, and what that actually means for the future of the region.
Okay, so here's our roadmap for today. First, we'll look at a new kind of conflict. Then, the legacy of the Troubles. Third, the power of disinformation. Fourth, manufacturing online unity. And finally, we'll wrap up with the political fallout.
Section 1. A new kind of conflict, from sectarianism to racism.
For decades, tension in this region was almost exclusively sectarian. But things are changing. After a severe knife attack in Belfast in June 2026, where a Sudanese national was charged with attempted murder, we saw a massive eruption of anti-immigrant protests. We're talking vehicles set on fire and homes and businesses belonging to immigrants targeted. The anger is increasingly being directed not across those old religious divides, but squarely at migrants and ethnic minorities.
And the scale of this shift, it's pretty staggering. An independent review found that the likelihood of someone being a victim of a reported racist incident is now 1 in 31. Let me just put that into perspective for you. The likelihood of being a victim of a sectarian incident is 1 in 1,777. That statistical gap is absolutely massive. It completely flips the script on what conflict looks like here.
Section 2. Legacy of the Troubles, the historical baseline.
To really grasp this, we need to quickly look at the baseline. For decades, conflict here was defined by sectarianism. It was predominantly a clash between Protestant loyalists who want the region to remain part of the UK and Catholic nationalists who wanted to join the Republic of Ireland. This era, known as the Troubles, officially ended with the 1998 Good Friday Agreement. And during that time, unlawful military-style paramilitary groups held immense power over their communities. So, what's happening now is that those historic lines of conflict, which were drawn across religion and constitutional preference, are being mapped onto a totally new dynamic: local residents versus newcomers. The underlying animosity didn't just evaporate, it kind of just found a new target in ethnic minorities and migrants. Now, here's the crucial point. Those legacy paramilitary structures didn't just vanish in 1998. They're still there, and they still exert control over certain neighborhoods. Human rights reports have highlighted a pattern where paramilitaries use violent, racist intimidation to literally deter migrants from moving into housing or setting up businesses in areas they control. Section 3. The power of disinformation, catalysts for violence. Let's look at the riots in Ballymena because they are a textbook example of how disinformation acts like a match in a powder keg. It started with a real criminal incident. 2 teenagers were charged with a horrific crime. But then, a completely false rumor spread like wildfire online, claiming a Romanian interpreter read the charges. That one piece of fake news hijacked the entire narrative. What started as peaceful protests rapidly mutated into 3 days of rioting and arson, specifically targeting immigrant homes.
We saw the exact same playbook in the Belvoir estate back in October 2023. False online rumors started flying around that empty public flats were being given to illegal immigrants. Suddenly, anonymous threatening banners go up. And when local politicians actually went out, met with the housing executive, and clarified that irregular migrants aren't even eligible for this housing, well, they were totally ignored. The flats were vandalized, and those politicians got targeted with threatening graffiti. The facts simply couldn't catch up to the digital fiction.
Section 4. Manufacturing online unity. The invisible hand.
During the severe anti-immigrant riots across Belfast in August 2024, digital forensics revealed something super interesting. Much of the online outrage pumping up these protests wasn't actually organic to the local communities. It was being pushed aggressively by people behind keyboards somewhere else. It was an invisible hand exploiting local vulnerabilities to manufacture a crisis. Far-right actors purposefully framed these protests using global extremist talking points, like calling it a defense of a Christian West under siege. And in a really unusual scene for Northern Ireland, far-right activists traveled up from Dublin carrying the Irish tricolour to stand right alongside loyalists carrying the UK Union flag. They flooded social media with the phrase "shoulder to shoulder." It was a highly orchestrated illusion, a myth that traditional Catholic nationalists and Protestant loyalists had magically united against a common immigrant enemy. But, the data tells the real story. Local Facebook posts about the initial protests barely got a few hundred interactions. However, when external, far-right influencers from Great Britain and the Republic of Ireland got their hands on the footage, especially that shoulder-to-shoulder video, those posts exploded with hundreds of thousands of views and massive engagement. Just look at the data from a specific agitation video from a Bangor protest. While 64% of the shares were localized to Northern Ireland, a massive 34% came from Great Britain. That proves external networks are actively fanning the flames. They're taking hyper-local grievances and pumping them onto the international stage to serve a broader agenda.
What we're really looking at here is a borderless digital hate machine. It co-opts very real, very local working-class frustrations, whether that's about housing, public services, or crime, and warps them into international talking points. It temporarily masks decades of sectarian division just for the sake of viral outrage.
Section 5. The political fallout. Dueling narratives.
So, how do local leaders respond? Well, the responses show just how fractured the landscape is. The Ulster Unionist Party, or UUP, issued an unequivocal condemnation. Their deputy leader clearly labeled the protests as race hate and flatly refused to blame immigrants for systemic societal failings, pointing the finger directly at political shortcomings instead.
Conversely, if we look at the Democratic Unionist Party, the DUP, they also strongly condemned the violence and racism. But their public statements heavily frame the context around the genuine concerns of residents regarding public services and affordable housing. They made a point to emphasize that they hear the frustrations of the communities where these protests took place.
These dueling narratives, one focusing squarely on the criminality of race hate, the other contextualizing the unrest within local deprivation, show us just how incredibly challenging it is for a post-conflict political system to handle these overlapping crises. It's this delicate balancing act of acknowledging real community struggles without in any way validating the violent, disinformation-fueled actions that follow.
Which leaves us with this final provocative thought. As the very nature of conflict in Northern Ireland evolves from sectarianism to racism, we really have to ask, how does a community truly heal when the ghosts of its past are so easily weaponized by the technology of its future? It's a question not just for Northern Ireland, but for anywhere dealing with the friction of our digital age. Thanks so much for joining me for this explainer. I hope it provided some clarity on an incredibly complex issue. Keep questioning the information you see online, and I'll catch you next time.